Hello, bonjour, and welcome to coverage of Face-to-Face Edmonton. My name's Haiyue. I'm here with champion of Pro Tour Avacyn Restored, Alexander Hayne. Alex, welcome to the stream. We are going to be covering the day 2 of Face-to-Face Edmonton, which is the west portion of Canada's regional championship for this season. And Alex, we're sending someone to the World Championships today, sending a bunch of people to the Pro Tour. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm pretty hyped to see some good Magic. Pioneer has a lot of different decks. We've got a really diverse metagame here, and yeah, I'm it's going to be cool to see someone go to Worlds and 8 players qualify for Pro Tour Barcelona, a city I'm pretty fond of. So it should be
Yeah,
fun.
me too. I mean, it's definitely some great times, great foods, and great atmosphere, should we say, to be had in Barcelona. Let's have a look at the schedule for this weekend and figure out what the players have been up to. So today is day 2. We're on Sunday. Yesterday, the players already played 8 rounds of Swiss. So they've come in this morning. They're doing pretty well, hopefully, in day 2, and they're looking forward to the top 8. So 5 rounds of Swiss still to play. That's 13 rounds overall. And then after that, we are going to be watching the top 8, which is single elimination, and it is Pioneer all weekend. Let's have a look at the prize pool that the players are battling out for. And you can see there the invites that we talked about. First place through 8th place get those Pro Tour invites, and first place competitor, of course, locking up the World Championship slot. But Alex, there's a nice little bit of cash on the line as well.
Yeah, 3,000 to first and 2,000 to second. It's a pretty good amount of cash for a bunch of players, and goes all the way down to 64th place. So I think almost all of our players in day 2 are going to make some money.
Pretty nice indeed. Let's have a look at the schedule for the entire tour, because Face-to-Face Edmonton, of course, is only one weekend out of many, and Face-to-Face, Canada's greatest and biggest Magic the Gathering store, running this awesome series of events throughout the country. And you can see the upcoming dates if you want to join in, if you want to compete at this level, or if you want to maybe just come and hang out and play some pickup games of Commander, or get your hand on some product, or meet some awesome cosplayers. You can see the dates of the next upcoming events: St. John's in July, as well as Toronto again, Saskatoon and Prince George in August, and Calgary and back to Toronto in the autumn. Alex, I love going to these events. When Face-to-Face was in town in Vancouver last season, I think it was just so awesome to see all of your friends from all over kind of the region, even all over the country, meet in one spot.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the Toronto event on July 15th is there's a team event there. So I've had a bunch of
Oh,
people ask me to go, and it sounds like it's a blast. So nothing quite as fun as Team Magic, getting to win, or sometimes I guess lose alongside your friends.
it makes the losing a little bit less,
Yeah.
less painful, I think, when you
Yeah,
have
because you're not
that
alone in your
solidarity.
loss, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, plenty to look forward to as we go through the second half of 2023, and I'm sure into the next season as well for Face to Face. But we are here right now in Edmonton, or at least spiritually in Edmonton. Of course, Alex and I are actually at home, bringing you coverage. And for our players, Alex, they've spent all of day 1 battling, and now they're here, they're looking at day 2. How do you get in that mindset to make your way through the last few rounds of Swiss?
It's tough. I mean, these tournaments not only are a test of skill, but also of endurance. Like you had a long day 1, you had to grind out 8 rounds. Today, you're hoping to play 8 more, but of course, most of the players are going to only play 5, and you're tired. Often the event ends late, starts early. You really just got to keep your focus and just kind of focus on each match one at a time. Play your best Magic, not worry about the standings really.
Mm-hmm. Well, for our first couple of featured players, they have certainly been playing their best Magic, at least all through yesterday. We're going to be starting off with David Booker against Wilson Mark. And David Booker was our one remaining 8-0 player overnight. So certainly leading in the standings as we come into round number 9. And David has brought mono white humans. Tell us about this deck, Alex.
So this deck looks to get out early with a bunch of cheap humans, and then has Thalia's Lieutenant, and then the new edition of the Capricious Vanguard that to basically pump them all up to make them bigger. Adeline also big heavy hitter, and you can just get out a lot of damage early, protect your creatures, or get an alpha swing with Brave the Elements, and it's really just an aggressive deck looking to end the game quickly.
Yeah, and I believe David also took mono white to Toronto, you were telling me, and did pretty well with it there as well.
Yeah, he finished in the top 32 there. Pretty good showing. The Toronto event's slightly bigger than this one, and of course off to a great start here. So really seems to know this deck inside and out.
All right, let's have a look at who David is playing against. And it's some big hitters of Canadian Magic here, right from the start of our broadcast. Alex Wilson Mark, who has had PT top 8, I believe, in 2018. And he's brought Rakdos midrange, which has been the somewhat dominant force in Pioneer for a little while now.
Yeah, Rakdos midrange you basically is the most popular deck in this event by the numbers, and most events really in Pioneer. You've got to expect the 1-2 punch of Thoughtseize into Fable. Just take your best card, filter out, and have all the removal for your stuff, or as well as just efficient threats all the way along the curve. Wilson going with the top 2 Shieldred and 2 Archfiend of the Dross, which a little bit unusual, but kind of exciting. I'm looking forward to see how it works.
Yeah, I think our viewers who, maybe have been following Pioneer or maybe even have been following Standard will be pretty familiar with this style of deck. We've seen these Rakdos mid-range strategies across a number of formats, always following somewhat of a similar pattern, especially hinging around the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. We'll see whether it works out here for Wilson. As you say, is the most played deck in the field, I believe, just over 10-12%-ish. But that number has been declining through the regional championship season, and we'll see whether Wilson can make good with it here as we go down to the action in round number 9. David Booker up against Wilson Mark. And it looks like David is on the play, and it's Hopeful Initiate right on turn number 1.
Yeah, David's looking to come out really quick before Wilson's kind of bigger, more powerful cards can take over and kind of assemble some synergies with these humans, where Wilson's looking to use some cheap removal spells kind of to disrupt what David's doing, and then land his kind of haymaker threats like Shieldred and the Archfiend, which is really powerful in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm excited to see some Archfiend of the Dross action. Hopefully it's going to get poking in. Oof. And there she is, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben on turn number 2. Now, is Thalia a problem for this Rakdos deck?
Yeah, it's a really annoying card. There's a lot of removal in the Rakdos deck, along with Fable being delayed a turn. We saw that Wilson didn't have a fatal push for turn 1, so this delays him a bit more. But he thankfully has this Blood Tithe Harvester, which is an answer for Thalia.
Yeah, does not get taxed, does come down on 2, makes that blood token, and of course, as you say, it has that sacrifice ability that can answer Thalia if Wilson gets to untap. But meanwhile, we're back over to David Booker, and turn 3 can be a pretty big turn for these mono white lists, something like an Adeline or a Thalia's Lieutenant, as we see here, come down. And yes, Alex, we are going to be arguing about the pronunciation of Lieutenant all day, I promise. Well, you see some counters get put on here.
Well, the Canadian way pronunciation is lieutenant, in fact, but I know. So I think no argument for me really, but I've switched from my American friends.
All right, so it's going to be the attacking. Hopefully, she gets that training boost as well. And you were talking about the aggressive start from this deck. Well, this is certainly it. We can see just how explosive this deck can be, especially on the play.
Yeah, I mean, Wilson's down to 13 already. Hasn't managed to enter things. David still has 4 creatures and that Mutavault lurking on the board. That's a lot to answer, especially through this Thalia, where Wilson's mana gets pretty heavily taxed. So we'll see what he can come up with.
Blood Tithe Harvester can, I believe, still target that Thalia with the, even though it has that +1/+1 counter on it. Dauntless Bodyguard is also protecting Thalia, but of course, doesn't really do that much against the -X effect. And here you see she is going to be hitting the graveyard. Now, what can Wilson follow up with here?
Well, the ideal, I think, for Wilson would be to have a pair of removal spells, a Fatal Push and something like, a Bone Crusher Giant Stomp. But being able to answer both the one drop and the lieutenant, and really realistically, of course, and being trading with the Dauntless Bodyguard, but just some way to slow down this aggression from David.
Second copy of Dauntless Bodyguard going on the stack. And David, respecting that there might be a response here.
Yeah, absolutely. Wilson has to respond here. Otherwise, the creature that
Oh,
ooh, let me see,
that's a Kogan's command.
it is. Colgan's command, one of in Wilson's list. Not really great in this matchup. You want it, for maybe the mirror where you're trying to get more value out of your cards, because 3 mana card is kind of expensive. We really, if you're on Wilson's side, you really wanted to be able to cast 2 spells here, but
Well, it is going to resolve. And I think that's an ossification that was put in the graveyard for that second road. The rebuild is on, though. And this is another massive attack in Wilson down to 6. Is there anything that this Rakdos deck can really do from this stage?
it's tough. I mean, these bodyguards protecting the hopeful initiate. It's and that Mutavault especially. I don't really think Wilson can come back here, but maybe a Fatal Push, Graveyard Trespasser to gain some life. Maybe that could let him survive and change some things, but it's tough. And
Oh,
sacrificing a blood, that's not it.
yeah, if you're on the other side of the battlefield, you're extremely, extremely pleased, and that is going to do it. So, David Booker continuing the run with mono white humans, at least in this game number 1, making it look easy against Rakdos midrange in the hands of Wilson Muck as we go to the sideboarding. I believe we can actually pull up the players' deck lists once again to talk about the sideboards. Let's have a look at Rakdos first. You're a game down, you're on the play this time, Alex. What are you thinking? What are you liking?
Well, basically, you want to morph into more of a control deck when you're a mid-range deck against an aggressive deck. So Wilson's looking to bring in all this removal, languish, extinction event. These sweepers. We'll definitely see the rending volley and noxious grasp. Those are excellent at hitting white creatures. Maybe even something like the Ratchet Bomb, or the Hidetsugu Conquers All. Cards that aren't specifically for this matchup, but being able to clean up some 1-drops can be nice.
Yeah, I'm honestly looking at this sideboard, it almost seems tailored to be this mono white deck. 3 extinction event, 1 languish, and the noxious grasp and 2 rending volley. That's a lot of tools. But what are you
Yeah.
going to cut for them?
Yeah, the main thing you want to cut, cards like Duress, of course, easy cuts. Reckoner, Bankbuster, a bit on the slower side. Generally, those are the cards you want to cut. The ones that are, kind of slow. Colgan's Command, for example, is a removal spell, but it is on the slower side. You're definitely not touching the Blood Tithe Harvesters, the Fables, the Bone Crusher Giants. Shieldred and Archfiend probably should stay. That's the question. I mean, I look when I see the sideboard. There's so many cards that want to come in, and not really that many that I want to take out. The Graveyard Trespasser definitely, you're a mid-tier threat here, and it can easily come out. But really, so the cards I'm definitely looking to see come out are the Duress, the Bankbuster, the Trespasser, and then kind of mix and match depending on what Wilson's plan is.
All right, let's have a look at the mono white list once again. And, David Booker did very well there on the play. Is there much to change up, or is it kind of more of the same?
Oh, absolutely. So as the mono white deck, you're aware that the Rakdos deck is going to be heavy on removal and sweepers post board. So these wedding announcements, uh, they're all coming in and they're fantastic. It's one of your really scary weapons from the Rakdos side, uh, because it can make your creatures bigger so that they can trade up, as well as just going wide and providing many bodies that need to get killed.
Okay, well, we'll see whether those wedding announcements are coming in and how game number 2 is going to be playing out. Let's go down back to the feature match area, and we are going to have Wilson, who is one of our players from Vancouver, by the way, which is where I am. And he's going to be on the play this time. Now, is there a big difference here between the play draw?
Absolutely huge difference. The Rakdos deck, I think, is, especially in game one, is hugely behind when it's on the draw. Post board, you have these sweepers to potentially come back, but still being on the play is really huge. Getting to spend a 2 mana to like fatal push to kill a Thalia, to be able to play your Fable on turn 3, for example, can be a really big deal. Also, just getting kind of to play your answers on curve way more efficiently before you get hit by the creatures each one time, gives you a lot more breathing room to land your big haymaker threats.
All right, looks like we have David on a mulligan. See whether the 6 suits him a little bit better. And Wilson, it looks like pretty happy with the 7, so does need to win 2 games on the trot to advance to 8-1 here, whereas David just needs to clear up this game to maintain that undefeated record as we go into the latter stages of this tournament. And it looks like the 6 is going to be a keep. So we are off here in game number 2 of round 9. Recruitment officer down on 1. And honestly, every time they have a 1-drop, it just feels like such an uphill struggle.
Well, I mean, the mono white deck has tons of 1-drops. That's it's really unlikely, in fact, for them not to have one with a functional draw. But we get to see here, though, the real difference of being on the play versus the draw. And Wilson gets to stomp the 1-drop before it gets any work, before the Thalia comes down and stops it happening.
Yeah, Bone Crusher Giant being sent on the adventure there. And Wilson with that Blightstep pathway to follow up. And we could just play out this Bone Crusher Giant here to present some board presence.
Absolutely. Used to be a better play against the humans deck before it added went up to basically 8 Lord effects. Because here, the Thalia's Lieutenant, good chance that it's going to get bigger and be able to attack through a 3 toughness creature with its first strike. So Wilson instead elects to go with a Blood Tithe Harvester.
I think that's Adeline being played out here. And she's going to be making a 1-1 when the Thalia starts getting in.
The Harvester just gladly jumps in front of the 1-1, though, and eats it. I think that the player's shortcut, not putting in the token for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Oh, second Harvester. So pair of Harvesters now here for Wilson. And the first Harvester has a choice. He's going to elect to take out the Adeline, the bigger threat on the battlefield, despite the fact that Thalia is still there taxing those non-creature spells.
Yeah, so this is also a big indicator that Wilson doesn't have a fatal push, because otherwise the revolt could be triggered by killing the Thalia, and then he could push the Adeline. Instead, electing to answer the much bigger, heavier hitter that also can kind of snowball out of control. And Wilson not having a 4th land being rough too.
Yeah, no 4th land for Wilson. There is a 4th land for David, and Recruitment Officer is going to be the play, but no other creatures to follow up. So the board is somewhat, should we say, under control for Wilson, who finds a Den of the Bugbear for turn.
Yeah, David looking like he might be a little flooded or full of reactive cards here. Thankfully has the castle, even if this Recruitment Officer, which dies, which it does, this castle can at least pump out some more creatures.
All right. Bone Crusher Giant now back from the adventure is going to be setting up as a 4-3 on the battlefield, and Wilson maybe getting a sniff of what you were talking about, suspecting the flood, just making sure to prioritize taking out the recruitment officer, which was going to be a way that David could have to get out of it. Let's see what he finds here.
So also in David's position, you want to be wary of playing creatures that are both even or both odd because of the extinction event. You want to vary
Uh,
your costs. Uh, so it could be that he's just holding back since additional lands here would be useful because of this castle. So
Shieldred the Apocalypse now for Wilson Mark. She has been just so dominant in so many formats, but Giant Killer is going to have something to say about that in the upkeep.
yeah, both players loving their adventure cards here. And yeah, Giant Killer, one of the clean answers to Shoulder that actually gets David slightly ahead.
I love the adventure cards. That's actually the best part of Pioneer for me is that you get to like play all of these cards that you loved in Standard, and then you feel a slight nostalgia for, and then you go to Pioneer, and there they are waiting for you.
Yeah, absolutely, and don't see that many Giant Killers. So I think David has one in his list, uh, but it's
Yeah, you're right. Just the single coffee, but did a
but
great
probably
job
also
for him
has
there.
yeah probably also has brought in Destroy Evils from the sideboard because they can answer both Shieldred, Archfiend, and Fable the Mirror Breaker as well.
Oh, here's wedding announcement. Is going to pay the tax of his own Thalia, and may as well use up that last mana for Giant Killer now. Go to the end step, make a human from the wedding announcement, and now Wilson, kind of having had a breather for a few turns, probably does need to find something here, Alex, to try and stem the bleeding a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these wedding announcements are really killer out of the mono white deck. It's kind of a Fable equivalent power level card in this matchup in particular. And David's board being too even and too odd costs means that an extinction event not even that great. That we found a
Oh,
yeah
Filigree Silex, I believe that is out of the
yes.
sideboard
So it's
for Wilson Mark.
yeah absolutely. So this is one of the answers to a wedding announcement, though it's of course a bit slow, but you can charge it up 3 times and then pop it to destroy the wedding announcement, or you can of course uh, do a make it a even bigger or smaller depending on what threats. There's nothing in the white deck that costs more than 3, but even just answering Thalia can sometimes be good.
So Bone Crusher Giant is going to be attacked by this Giant Killer. This is an attack in for 5 from David. And I'm just going back to the previous turn, Alex, where Wilson, maybe was hesitating, had something to do in the end step, and then decided not to. And we're going to see Rending Volley now, I believe, take care of Thalia.
And yeah, these 2 creatures coming in,
Oh,
replacement Thalia, and the wedding announcement's gonna get David a card, which is even better than a 1/1.
counter goes on that Filigree Silex. Well, maybe that solves the mystery as well of what David was holding in hand, being the spare Thalia, should we say.
Yeah, and the Filigree Silex answers both the 1-drops. So just Thalia versus Bone Crusher. We see
Thalia
why.
versus the world. David Becker.
We see also why Wilson elected instead of killing the giant killer to kill the Thalia, because even though it enabled an attack from David through the Bone Crusher Giant, uh, the being able to clean up all the 1-drops with the Filigree Silex was his plan.
That makes a
And
lot of sense.
looks like we're gonna kind of stare at each other a little bit here.
Yeah, here's another Dauntless Bodyguard. I mean, this deck does not lack in 1 mana 2/1s, as you rightly pointed out earlier. And now we're going to go to the end step of David. That wedding announcement is going to be flipping. All of the creatures are going to be getting buffed. And, for the Rakdos deck, it's going to be the cycle here with the blood token. But a lot of we're used to seeing these Raptors decks really have a flow, right? They play out their fables, they're getting through their deck quickly. There's a lot of board presence going on, but a little bit surprised to see Wilson with a lot of cards in hand, but not a lot necessarily going on.
Yeah, that's the danger with too many removal spells because the white deck does have these tools like the castle, like the wedding announcement, that can make one for one removal look kind of silly. And as the Rakdos deck, you really do need to have one of your top end cards to punish the white deck, whether it's Archfiend, Shieldred, or a Fable. And Wilson doesn't really have one of those. His Shieldred got answered by Giant Killer, and now we're seeing
Oh,
Extinction Event.
so we did see Go for the Throat, I believe, on the one drop earlier, and Extinction Event, clean answer to Thalia, plus those tokens. Bone Crusher Giant is going to start coming across now. Wilson Mark finding that sweeper effect certainly at the right time. Here is another human being made by that Castle Ardenvale that you were talking about earlier. And these are tutus. So Castle Ardenvale pumping out tutus, not too shabby.
So David, interestingly, elects not to attack, hoping to make a second token and double block the Bone Crusher, with the idea being that he's not winning the race as is, and is hoping to go for a longer game, especially against these creature lands on Wilson's side.
Now, does Mono White play the long game well?
Uh, when you have multiple wedding announcements, you can, but generally the long game is going to favor the Rakdos deck. We see
Wilson getting aggressive here, firing up that Hive of the Eye Tyrant with the Bone Crusher Giant as well, and saying, okay, you can double block one of these, but, gonna make sure the pressure is kept on.
Yeah, and if you're David's side, you also wonder if there's a fatal push or a rending volley in Wilson's hand, which there
Oh,
is. So Wilson gets a 2-for-1 sort of, at least answers two creatures with one card, and
yeah. Yeah,
brings David
sort
down to
of.
12. So Wilson's currently ahead on life, which is a good place to be in this matchup.
Mutavault now here for David Booker. Sort of a threat, but sort of also not.
And Wilson still has this blood token, so he's drawing good cards or can filter away bad ones, and still has the better board presence. Even though it's important to note the Mutavault's a 3/3, so can potentially trade it for this Bone Crusher right here.
Yeah. There it is. And here's Graveyard Trespasser, mid-tier threat that you referred to earlier. I was going to jump to the defense of Graveyard Trespasser, but actually mid-tier threat is pretty much exactly, I think, where most people place
Yeah, well,
this card.
we've been seeing the Rakdos mid-range decks cutting them. It used to be a 4 of in almost every list, and now most lists seem to be playing just 2. And it's partly due the decline of these graveyard decks, but
That makes a lot of sense. Here is Recruitment Officer now. And this time, David is going to get to activate. And look at the top 4. Get a creature into the hand, and let's see whether he can find something helpful here. I think, Alex, when we look at these mono white decks, most people think, okay, it's white weenie, it's aggressive. And they don't really necessarily think about whether they're comfortable or happy to get into this kind of grindy late game tussle.
yeah, I think it's not ideal. If you're playing white weenie, you want to end. You want to have those turn 4 kills through blockers, or very very quick efficient draws. But especially in post board in this matchup, you are prepared to play these long games. And every time David draws another wedding announcement, it's just completely brutal for Wilson, because not only does it represent a bunch more threats, but then every single creature afterwards just suddenly becomes bigger. We saw Mutavault trade for Bone Crusher Giant.
Mm.
We've seen these tokens, instead of just being 1/1s from the castle, being actual 2/2s, which are real pieces of cardboard. Wilson still seems to be doing pretty well, but it's David's still in this despite having drawn 8 lands, which is really not what you hope to do when you're playing this white aggressive deck.
The Graveyard Trespasser is going to start getting in, and that attack trigger, of course, draining David for some life as well as buffering up Wilson's life total. And David's going to take the damage, it looks like, down to 7 for mono white in the hands of David Booker, who was our 8-0 player overnight. And here's Fable of the Mirror Breaker, finally, for Wilson Mark. Maybe a little bit later than we're used to seeing it, but better late than never, and Goblin Shaman acquired.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still good here. Wilson looks like he has 1, maybe 2 cards in hand, but has already used up his blood. So at this stage, being able to cash in a couple lands for a couple spells is really huge. But David was ready with the Destroy Evil.
Yeah, Destroy Evil is such a nice, flexible piece of interaction for these mono white lists. Taking care of the Fable, the Goblin is going to remain an Adeline, the follow-up.
So Adeline currently with 2 creatures is a 3/5 because of the wedding announcement, which is very good size against this trespasser. See if David decides to attack, and attack does put. Ooh, and he has a Mutavault too, which is pretty good.
Yeah, so before the attack step, it is going to be power word kill on Adeline. So no attack from David Booker. Adeline hits the bin, back over to Wilson.
And it looks like both players are out of cards, so it's kind of an exciting time, Haiyue. This David has not just the castle, but the Mutavault too can be useful. But he's kind of on the back foot actually against a couple creature lands from Wilson, and Wilson has a low life total, can be pressured. And it seems like here actually David has shifted to becoming the control deck. He just kind of needs to hold on, and his castle will eventually sort of take over.
Some very interesting dynamics here between these two decks. The mono white humans doing a great job of playing the mid-range game, and Wilson needing to find a way to really lock this one in before, as you say, these utility lands can make their mark. And speaking of utility lands, it looks like it's going to be potentially a firing up of his own. Den of the Bugbear, I think, in consideration here.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Wilson, especially if you haven't drawn a good card, you really need to apply some pressure here. And I really like attacking with the Den of the Bugbear here instead of the Hive, because this turn David's limited to 2 blockers, and if you're getting in at least 1 free damage from the Trespasser, you're not going to cast a spell which will flip it if it doesn't get killed here, and really just makes it awkward for David to block profitably.
This is a pretty big attack in. The trigger's going to put David down to just 6 life. This is more than lethal, so some blocks are going to have to be made here. We might see this Mutavault fire up. We might see another token being made from the castle.
Yeah, I think that David's best play is to animate this Mutavault, because he really needs to get rid of both these threats here, whereas a castle token doesn't answer in the same way.
Yeah, that Mutavault is a 3/3, so it is going to eat that Goblin Shaman and goes down to 2 life. Now it is night, so Graveyard Trespasser is going to flip over to Graveyard Glutton, which means that the attack trigger alone could be lethal for David. He really needs to find something to answer it, and nothing is to be found. So Wilson Mark evens things up here in round number 9. We're going to see a decider between these two decks, certainly both mainstays of this Pioneer format. And, we kind of got to see both decks really do their thing in games 1 and 2. Very different games before the sideboarding for that final one.
Yeah, really get to see both the difference of game 1 versus game 2 with the sideboarding cards, both the sweepers from Wilson, as well as the rending volleys being huge, and and we also got to see how the power of wedding announcement, how it allows the mono white deck to stay in these long games. But of course, in game one, we just got to see mono white be on the play and just curve out with a bunch of things and just smash, which is what I think
Kind of
why you, yeah.
plan A, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's all.
that's why you're playing this deck.
I think
You're
it's plan
playing.
A,
You want to
plan
go one,
B.
two, three. Yeah, we can maybe go down the list a bit further. Now, we talked about play and draw a lot earlier on, but in terms of the actual cards that you're bringing in, if you're mono white, you actually change things up a lot.
I think it's not going to change things that much. I think you still really are going to have these wedding announcements. You're probably cutting the anointed peacekeeper, but it's possible that on the play that maybe that card is it's fast enough to prevent Fable or to shut down a Blood Tithe Harvester. Uh,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
I think it's possible that as the Rakdos deck, on the play, maybe you don't want Thoughtseize, you want to just answer things, but on the draw, you want Thoughtseize as another cheap answer to things.
Well, let's have a
So
look at the Rakdos list and see, what the options are as we go into the final deciding game here between these two players in round number 9. So
yeah,
you
we got to
think
see
could
that
maybe
Wilson. Yeah, possibly Thoughtseize could be in for this game. Uh, we know that Wilson likes the Graveyard Trespassers and the Silex, probably the Ratchet Bomb. We'll see what else. See how differently they're boarded.
All right, let's go down to the action and we can find out who's going to take it home here between these two players in round number 9 of Face to Face Edmonton. You are watching Canada's West flight of the regional championship. 8 Pro Tour invites, 1 World Championship invite on the line, recruitment officer on the battlefield for David Booker on turn number 1.
So Wilson has a tap land on turn 1, which you really don't want to see if you're on the Rakdos side, because it's just this can happen. You're so far behind. A 1-drop into Athalia, and Wilson didn't have a 1-drop to play last turn, so 2 drops other than Blood Tithe Harvester aren't really playable here, and the sweepers like Extinction Event and Languish are just too slow if you're trying to play them through Athalia.
It is a pass back. No Blood Tithe Harvester. Could still be something like a Fatal Push if Wilson has found some cheap removal, but meanwhile, David Booker gets to untap with both creatures, fires up the Mutavault, and this is a big attack in. Decides to not play out something like a 2 or a 3-drop here.
Yeah, I mean, an Adeline there would have been kind of backbreaking for Wilson, but even just this hit, Wilson not having anything, and then another 1-drop, it's quite a lot of pressure. Wilson's down to 12. There's at least 8 power to attack. We can see an end to this game pretty quickly.
Yeah, let's see what Wilson finds here. Not doing anything on the first 2 turns of the game. Certainly not really where you want to be. And you can see it maybe a little bit reflected in the body language there as well, Alex. Just trying to figure out if there's a way through this army.
Yeah, Wilson kind of not looking a little dejected here, trying to find out. It's the facial expression of "Can I win?" Still that I'm very familiar with.
I mean, sometimes, you get into game 3, maybe you've kept a bit of a slower hand and you're really hoping that your opponent didn't do exactly this, right? And David
Yeah,
Booker says, no, they're all coming in. Sure, we can stomp, that's going to be hitting the Thalia of 6 damage down to just 6 life. Wilson really needs some help now. Let's see what there is. Certainly needs to take care of multiple of these threats.
yeah. I mean, half his life is gone. If he doesn't do anything, David has lethal. Though David didn't have a follow up threat at all. Another Thalia could have come down, or Thalia's lieutenant or lieutenant could have come down as well and really pumped up the team. But
Okay, well, it's going to be just Bone Crusher Giant on the battlefield. That's going to be able to block one thing if David doesn't have an answer.
so David may either I would guess is either flooded with reactive cards or flooded with lands. This looks like it could be an ossification.
It is an ossification. That's going to be targeting one of the planes, and the effect is going to be targeting Bone Crusher Giant, which does not trigger the damage ability.
Yeah, and if Wilson doesn't have a 1 mana removal spell and David decides to go for it with the Mutavault again, we're gonna just see the end of this game here. But it looks like
Mutavault
looks like
not being fired up.
it is being fired up, but tapped fired up to add a lieutenant to the board, which also provides lethal. But
here we go. Okay, there is a fatal push. So Wilson Mock lives through the turn, goes down to 3, but is now facing so many lethal attackers.
Yeah, the lieutenant's not lethal yet, but really it's not that hard to imagine David having 2 more humans, or an Adeline does it, another lieutenant does it, a Vanguard does it. There's a lot of ways for all 3 of these threats to be lethal, and the way David's played this is really smart. Made it so that even through a sweeper, this Mutavault is a lethal attacker. And forced Wilson, instead of killing the Mutavault, to kill one of the creatures that could get caught in the sweeper. So really, it's putting Wilson in a chokehold here.
Yeah, and this lieutenant being even with the recruitment officer being odd means extinction event not going to be super helpful for Wilson either. Passes the turn back, has quite a few cards to work with, but we'll see. Oh my goodness, there is Adeline.
Yeah.
And this is surely too much now for Wilson Mock to overcome.
Yeah, Wilson has to have 3 removal spells here. For either the Adeline or the lieutenant, as well as the Mutavault and the recruitment officer. And
that seems like a tall order. Let's see what
it does seem like a tall order, but
I mean, certainly stranger things have happened, but this is it would need to be rending volley push.
Yeah, it's got to be 2. Yeah, Wilson has enough mana to cast 2 different 2-mana removal spells and 1 mana removal spell. Even Stomp still can kill the lieutenant here, so it gives a wider range of cards that he could have, but
doesn't have it. That's gonna do it. David Booker continues his undefeated run through the Swiss portion of Face-to-Face Edmonton, advancing to 9-0 with mono white humans after that. And Wilson Mock on Rakdos midrange now sitting at 7-2. Certainly still very much live with those top 8 hopes, Alex.
Absolutely. I think looking at the number of players in the event, that 10 wins and 3 losses, almost certainly a lock for top 8. And maybe 9 wins, 3 losses, and a draw. A good chance, especially with his tiebreakers like David Booker has. So he might have just stamped his ticket to the top 8.
Maybe. Well, we'll see as we go through the next few rounds of Swiss, but certainly David Booker looks like in pole position as we get towards the business end of the tournament. So, Alex, mono white against Rakdos, a nice little, slide into the Pioneer broadcast today. I think, 2 decks that a lot of our viewers will be pretty familiar with. And certainly seems the kind of safe or well-known choice is working out for both of the competitors.
Yeah, we got to see also kind of both sides of the white weenie deck. We got to see in game 1 and game 3 the aggressive draw that not quite enough answers from the Rakdos deck to answer. But we also got to see game 2 maybe a little bit more flooding, a bit more kind of the grindy role, which wasn't quite enough, but almost was enough to actually outgrind the Rakdos deck. So we get to see the power of the white weenie deck there, and the Rakdos deck really just very flexible, and that's why a lot of people choose it. And I'm hoping to see some more cool matches today.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. All right, my friends, we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we will be moving on to round number 10. So stay with us. Round number 10 coming up after the break. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to coverage of Face to Face Edmonton. My name's Haiyue. I'm here with Alexander Hayne, and we are about to go into round number 10 here at Edmonton, the Canadian West Flight Regional Championship, shall we say. And Alex, I think we have we had some pretty big names in Canadian Magic in the last round, but we're continuing that trend with the feature match this time round. It's Rob Anderson going up against Edgar Magayesh, and I believe you know both of these players pretty well, Alex.
Yeah, I know both of them. They're both real mainstays. Edgar, a GP champion, has some other top eights and a lot of success on the GP circuit, uh, as well as the SEG circuit. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and Rob, also a Grand Prix champion, and as another top eight, where actually I beat him, and he and I
Oh,
were
wow.
actually next door neighbors for a number of years. So, both bunch of Pro Tour experience, both really tough competitors. So should be a good match.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it plays out. Let's have a look at the decks that they're playing. A little bit of a switch from what we were looking at before. Is it Phoenix for Rob Anderson? And Phoenix, I feel like has been a little bit quiet in the metagame in recent months, but excited to see it here and doing well.
Yeah, it was a big deck in like last season of the RCs. Really kind of decrease in play from, I think the increase in red black was thought to be a bad matchup. A lot of graveyard hate, which people kind of have cut. I mean, I talked to Edgar. In fact, he's changed his sideboard a lot, cutting a lot of the graveyard hate because of the decrease in Grease Fang and other graveyard decks, which of
Mm.
course bodes well for Rob, because Phoenix deck is trying to basically go get a lot of card advantage, churn a bunch, involving putting a bunch of Phoenix in the graveyard, and then usually use Galvanic Iteration, Temporal Trespass to take a couple of turns with a few Phoenixes, which usually like kills your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that this deck is rising from the ashes?
Oh no! uh,
Got him.
you score one for Haiyue. uh, yeah,
I
I mean, I
mean,
think I've seen
sorry.
I've seen more players, good players, registering this deck for this event, and yeah, I think it might be really well positioned with the rise of spirits as well. I think Phoenix is very well positioned.
Yeah, certainly every time, the metagame shifts a little bit, people are maybe taking their eye off the graveyard a little and they're Phoenix ready to swoop in and take that spot again. So Phoenix in the hands of Rob Anderson going up against Edgar Magayesh with Rakdos Sacrifice. Pretty excited to see some cats, some ovens, and some mayhem devils.
Yeah, if you like cooking cats, this is the deck for you. It uses Witch's Oven, Cauldron Familiar is a nice loop to basically drain your opponent for one every turn, as well as get a sacrifice trigger. Mayhem Devil, really the star of the show, though. Makes every treasure, every food, uh, do an extra damage to your opponent. There's other random interactions too, of course. You claim the firstborn and their creature, sack it to Witch's Oven, sack it to Deadly Dispute, etc. So pretty powerful deck. Really, I think a lot of the Rakdos mid range players are moving towards Rakdos Sacrifice because it's just shown to be really a better deck in terms of the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, this deck is pretty sweet. I did have a little play around in the Pioneer format this week on Modo before the broadcast day, and certainly right, they'll sacrifice a lot of fun, and especially if you're used to this strategy from standard of seasons past, great to see it here again. Let's go down to the action now. I believe we have the match ready for all of you. Round number 10, Rob Anderson up against Edgar Magalhaes here at Face to Face Edmonton. And it looks like we have Edgar on the play here with Ragdoll Sag tap land on turn number 1. Now, how does this matchup really play out?
So Edgar is looking to apply some pressure while kind of Rob is going to be spinning his wheels, so to speak. A bunch of cantrips, pieces of the puzzle. It gets to a point where Rob can kind of set up this end game combo that Edgar can't really interact with that well. So Edgar's looking to be the aggressor. Uh, so no plays on the first couple turns is not really where you want to be. But probably there's a Fable coming on the third turn, I would guess.
So back over to Rob, who has managed to find a copy of Phoenix, and that is in the graveyard, ready to go.
Yeah, two ops didn't seem to find him a land, and he had to discard a hand size. So that's where how this Phoenix ended up here. Uh, that is one of the weaknesses of the Phoenix deck. It doesn't play a very high land count because it has so many cantrips and can be vulnerable there.
Well, did find that second land after all, with the third copy of Ops. And Fiery Impulse taking out the Goblin Shaman token as well. Meanwhile, Edgar's going to get to do a bit of a looting of his own. I see some cards maybe sent to the graveyard here, and have a bit of a re-filtering of the hand. Well, Edgar's deck, we haven't really seen very much sacrifice yet. It has looked pretty just Rakdos mid-rangey so far.
Yes, it still has the Thoughtseize and the Fable elements of the regular Rakdos deck as well as the Blood Tithe Harvester. But really, as I said, the Mayhem Devil is the card that kind of puts everything into overdrive, and the Fables are actually better out of the Rakdos Sacrifice deck than out of Rakdos Midrange because first of all, the treasures you get are sacrificed, and then the tokens you make are sacrificed, and just being able to make extra copies of Mayhem Devil, you can really kind of kill your opponent out of nowhere sometimes. It's hard to do against the Phoenix deck because there's a lot of this removal. Both Fiery Impulse and Lightning Axe can answer pretty cleanly a Mayhem Devil.
Wow, second copy of Fable now for Edgar. I think CS Step Pathway was the land return. And
we saw Edgar only discard one land to the first Fable, which is an indicator of strength, of course. If he had more bad cards to discard, he would have. So I'm expecting some explosive later turns here potentially.
Okay, well, meanwhile, both players content to keep setting up Charter Course, putting a land in the graveyard for Rob, and down goes the second Goblin Shaman. Not gonna let those stick around. Not gonna let them make the treasure tokens. And Edgar, a little bit of a shortcut here. One of the Fables is going to be on 2, so the one that was on 2 is staying on 2, and one of them, of course, flips to become the Reflection.
Yeah, and Rob's managed to find his third land, and he discarded a Hall, so maybe even has a fourth land in hand. We'll see. But I'm excited to see what Edgar does. Really, this Reflection, if is summoning sick this turn, but it can do some pretty exciting things if not. And Edgar again only discarding one card. The cat is.
Wow, getting to discard the cat is so cool. Like normally, I think you think about Fable as, okay, if I have too many lands or maybe some removal that's not lining up well, I can cycle things away. But being able to put something in the graveyard that can actually come back later is pretty sweet. Although it's going to be prioritizing getting that Phoenix out of the graveyard this turn with Hive of the Eye Tyrant.
Yeah, definitely smart to get the Phoenix out, though. This Phoenix deck compared to Phoenix decks of earlier formats isn't that efficient in terms of mana at returning Phoenixes, but it likes to cast things like Piece of the Puzzle. But the Hive getting rid of the Phoenix is going to provide some potential problems later for Rob, though Ledger Shredder can be a really good backup threat for this Phoenix deck. But of course, the Rakdos Sacrifice deck between Claim the Firstborn and Fatal Push is very good at answering 2-drops.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Pieces of the Puzzle was the play there for Rob. I think there was a Phoenix that went into the graveyard, although we don't have the full graveyard of Rob Anderson on the screen. It has become massive.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Edgar has 2 copies of Reflection now. That definitely enables some amount of shenanigans, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Copy Reflection gives you a hasty Reflection that you can use again to copy. And so if you do that in your opponent's end step, the Reflections actually last through your turn and can attack, which is, a kind of a finish with 2 Reflections. one really neat trick you can do is here that Edgar could consider is in his own end step. Since Rob is tapped out, he can make one hasty copy, and then uh, it would still survive during Rob's turn until his end step, and then he could use it again. That way, potentially being better against removal, even with being able to copy another token rather than the original. I think it would require making two copies in the end step, but it's something Edgar could think about if he's trying to play conservatively.
Now you know these players pretty well. Would you say that Edgar is that kind of conservative? I don't know. Let's say careful player.
Somewhat, but what really depends here is whether Edgar has other plays available. For instance, firing up this hive could be more efficient, getting rid of that other Phoenix, and then just making one token on the end step. Uh, Edgar could even decide just to attack for two. It it's it really depends on the context of his hand, and based off of these discards, if I was in Rob's seat, I'd be very scared of what Edgar has in hand.
Okay, let's see now. Looks like Edgar has considered his options. Maybe.
It looks like not attacking with Hive, at least.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't look like attacking with Hive. Blood-type Harvester is going to be the play. So, little 2-drop here for Edgar, and Blood-type Harvester and Reflection has also definitely been a play pattern that is feared by many.
Absolutely, they're best friends. They're BFFs. They like to hang out together and go on trips on the weekend. And
go on trips on the weekend. Where do you think they're going?
They try and get they try and get trophies, I think, but
okay, I see. All right, so they're just like piling into a car, like driving to every GP that they can. Although,
so looks honestly, like we did see Edgar make the end step reflections, like as I thought he might.
Oh, here's Treasure Cruise now for Rob Anderson. And massive graveyard, certainly plenty of fuel to enable this to be played for one. How about Ancestral Recall, Alex? Is that a good card?
I think it's a pretty good card, though. Part of it is being able to force your opponent to draw 3. That's my favorite part of the card.
That's my favorite part. Wow.
I've never used that part myself, but it's just the theory of it. It sounds fun.
One day. It's still on the wish list.
All right, so Rob does in fact have removal spell. He's cast 2 spells so far here, so a third spell would enable the Phoenix to come back.
Okay, let's see what he has. I mean, he just drew 3 cards off that Treasure Cruise, so we do expect the hand to be, refilled. Oh, and it's Lightning Axe pitching a Hold of the Storm Giant, and that's going to take care of the second reflection. So both reflections now down.
Well, what's interesting is that Edgar, because he has these copied reflections, can float these through end steps, these copies, so that he always still has one in play, which feels kind of weird. The originals are gone, but the copies, even though they're ephemeral, can still keep at least one
or 2 at all lingering times. Around.
Yeah.
Wait.
Their presence will still be felt.
Yeah, for sure. But that, for those that were counting, that was the third spell. So when we go to the combat step, there you see it. Arclight Phoenix coming out of the graveyard for the first time here for Rob Anderson in our feature match area. No attack, potentially, it looks like. Or maybe this is a response.
It looks like this is the end step. Otherwise, it wouldn't really make sense for Edgar to be doing this in the combat step. So.
All right. Oh.
So Rob trades in some of his card advantage with these Lightning Axes, but cards are in high supply usually from the Phoenix side, and Edgar still holds onto these 2 reflections based off his clever play, even though Rob had removal for the originals.
But they are going to go away at the end step.
Right, but
this
Edgar
second.
can make copies during his end step so that those ones will go in the next end step, and then make copies so that they go in the next end step forever. It just requires 2 mana commitment every
Okay,
turn.
all right. So let's see. Let's see what Edgar decides to do here. I mean, it is a bit of a head scratcher. Yeah, you can see him really taking the time to ponder through all of the decisions, and certainly cannot blame him for doing so with so much on the line here at face to face Edmonton. Everyone here thinking about that top eight, thinking about the Pro Tour invites, and of course, thinking about the World Championship invite for the winner.
Yeah, and really, if Edgar has something like a Mayhem Devil here, there's a lot of math to go through because there's a lot of potential sacrifice triggers, a lot of potential Mayhem Devils, and he's got to decide what his plan is. Like, is he, going to try and kill right now? Is he going to kind of keep delaying these reflections going away? Is he going to interact more with Rob? It's a tight spot, and really, the lack of early aggression from Edgar has kind of put him in this position where it's hard because as the Rack of Sacrifice deck, he'd much rather Rob was at 7 life. Then the math is a lot easier on all these Mayhem Devil shenanigans.
Okay, so this we are potentially now in the end step then, if we're seeing
Yeah,
these
it is. We're probably in the end step.
activations.
Yeah. So again, Edgar looks like he floats these once again. And now Rob gets to do some more card draw stuff. That's the really fun thing about
Wow.
Phoenix Haiyue. I personally love drawing cards. It's one of my favorite things in Magic, and the Phoenix deck does that like no other.
I mean, I think we can be in agreement there, Alex. And Pieces of the Puzzle doing a great job of getting some cards into hand and putting another Phoenix in the graveyard. 2 more mana available, so we could still see that second Phoenix come back this turn. And, we're talking about blue cards, we're talking about drawing cards, talking about Ancestral Recall. We actually discovered earlier on that there is a trophy for this event. For the regional championship, and it is kind of shaped like a large blue mana symbol, right? Like a teardrop shape.
Yes,
It's pretty
the
cool. If you
greatest
go on
mana
Twitter, you'll
symbol.
see it. Yeah, it's and here's consider. So that's spell number 2 for those of you who are counting.
But yeah, if you're a fan of Ancestral Recall, the Phoenix deck has Ancestral Recall. It has Time Walk. Sure, they might be the the cheap imitators, where you require a bunch of cards in your
I
graveyard to
don't know
do
if they're cheap. They're like 7 or 8 mana spells, Alex.
it.
Hmm.
The well, that is true. The expensive imitators, I should say, but
Mhm.
that is really those are kind of the payoffs besides Phoenix itself to the deck being able to play these cards because you fill your graveyard so much.